Welcome to the show. As you know, this is Dr. Felly. I'm recording here. Mark Torres is out of the studio, and I'm here with a very special creative man with a very interesting past, Scott Homan. He produced and directed a movie called, oh, well, really a documentary, but I guess it's a movie, isn't it? Well, he'll tell us. It's called Whitney's Underground. Very interesting. I've learned a lot already now. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dr. Feldy. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Now, could you mind telling us a little about what this documentary is about?
Yeah, I usually lead with it's about artists who escaped a cult. And that usually has a typical response of like gasps, mouths, jaws drop, eyes widen, or what? Lean ins happen. But really, it's a special activist film that chronicles it starts by doing character development, chronicling an kind of an unknown music community that thrived from the late 80s to the early 2000s, like a
Hmm.
17-year period by a group of musicians in Minneapolis, like 300 to 500 kids, depending on when you're thinking of it, called Nuclear Gopher. And it was an insular artist community inside of a religious cult that you probably have in your neighborhood. Maybe they're your neighbors. They've probably come to your house and
Hmm.
tried to talk to you about something.
Hmm.
And then it chronicles, it's like a 3 act film where you get to know everybody, you get to know the music, and the music's excellent. I was not in that scene, but I knew of it at the time. And then someone is removed from the community in a very harsh way, which is the common way, but it's really harsh. And a series of losses. And then there's a sort of, okay, well, what happens after that? Tragedy. And it's this like rise of these people, these artists all finding their voice without restrictions because they live with restrictions. And it's like, well, wow, what did they make after that crazy mess? Um, yeah, Witness Underground, escaping a cult.
And it's available on Amazon and Tubi. I watched on
Yes,
Tubi.
it just came out. Yeah, it just came out. So this is the moment we've been waiting for 6 years. That's how long it takes to make a documentary and
Six
get it
years.
online. Yeah, turns out
Oh my
I didn't know that.
goodness.
I probably wouldn't have started it if I had known how long it would take to get to the goal. But I'm really happy that it's here and that it's out, so
Did
I
it.
can go watch it for free.
You did it and bravo. And I'm learning. I always love to learn. And is this true that this group of artists they made the first album that was ever live streamed from the internet? Is that true? Because that's pretty legendary, groundbreaking info.
Right? Yeah, I had to put that in there. People were like, "That's so boring, nobody cares." But it's like that's
What?
internet history. That is the
No, it's
coolest little
groundbreaking.
factoid that I wanted to
Yeah.
lead with. Like, how did we not know about this? They were
Yeah,
making history.
it was really cool on a parallel. I'll just mention this. I had a friend, Michael Stern. He's won an Emmy. He's done some great directing, and he had a sketch prank show back probably in the early 90s, I want to say, or 2000s. But simply put, they brought it to someone at Howard Stern, and they brought it to man, I think the president who ran FiOS, and they said, "Who's gonna watch a show live stream from the internet? Who's gonna watch that?" And apparently, the guy's working in a King Cullen. Nothing wrong with King Cullen, but he's not running media, that's for sure. So live streaming, hey, if you're one of the first live streamers, I was one of the first, definitely people to go live actually back in 2007. It's very interesting to me. Very
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Anyone who
Yeah.
adopted new tech, um, they were ahead of the curve by 5 or 10 years on the general
Right.
population of even of USA, but the global population. People just started live streaming. You're doing what we're doing right now. This became normal during the pandemic, but it's been
Right.
available with Skype since like the late 90s, right?
Since
Or early
Skype,
2000s.
well, right since Skype, I remember 2007, I did reporting for the Obama inauguration, and there was Vomodo television that had a backpack, and it was mobile technology. And I was talking to people, I think at Fox News, they had a whole van. I crawled into the truck, and they were like, "What? You can go live? You don't need a van? What?" I mean, that was 2007. But anyway, back to
Yeah.
your movie. And speaking about being ahead of the curve, I mean, well, I learned this from the documentary, and I think I've heard this before, that Jehovah Witness teaches that since 1872, they've been teaching that Armageddon is going to happen, and that basically like 99% of people will be wiped out, right?
That's
Now,
right. Yeah.
it sounds like they're kind of ahead of the curve because if you listen to the popular speaking now, people are speaking, "Oh, it's the end of the world. We're going to war." I mean, it's kind of trending.
Yeah. The end of the world is a really popular, it's a hit message. People love
Yeah.
to talk about it. The news agencies love to put it on the title of their magazines and newspaper articles.
Do you think that would cause a surge of popularity of people joining Jehovah Witnesses?
That has been their hook. This is the end of the world. Get in while you still can. There's a few
Ah,
slots left. We have 144,000 slots, and people keep dropping out, and so there's more new slots now. That's one
maybe
of their
they
weird
should
ideologies. But
maybe they should like go to Ukraine or Russia or one of these war-torn countries because they might feel that. But anyway, let's get back to you. Another thing I learned is that one of the people, the musicians, was introduced to Lionel Richie and recounts the story, and someone said, "Oh, Lionel Richie, disco invites the demons in." What? Disco invites demons? Y'all was just hired to dance at a party a couple days ago, and disco's so happy and it's so positive, it gets me going. And I'm celibate, so I'm not overly sexual. It's definitely didn't drive me to do anything nefarious. Now, what's all that all about? Disco invites the demons. Was there disco in this group? What's going on with disco?
I don't think it's anything against Lionel Richie. It was a very, it's like, yeah. There's a trend in fundamentalist religions, and this is a very fundamentalist, super conservative religion that um, music, the newest music the young people are listening to is the worst thing. And it's definitely Satan who's running the music industry. And it's always the oldest generation who's like, that's dangerous, stop it. Like, I'm sure people are saying that about TikTok and this in this religion, or they were when TikTok was new or when Instagram was new. They definitely were saying the internet was evil when I was like
Right.
in the 90s. And then of course now they have their own website. And when I was like, hey, you guys, our religion has, I was in the religion, my parents joined it. I was like,
Right.
our religion has a website. And they're like, that's ridiculous. You're listening to evil apostates you're listening to Satan. And then of course
What?
now they're an internet only religion. Like people are on Zoom to go to church half the time. Like
Really? Is it
pandemic,
predominantly
they
internet?
transitioned to televangelism and Zoom calls. They still
Wow.
have some of their buildings. Like they're trying to get people to go back. And a lot of people are like,
Huh.
going to church with the camera off is pretty great. I can do whatever I want. I can sleep
Right.
in.
Right, right, right. Right. That's a whole nother can of worms. We can go there.
Yeah.
I'll go out another day because I can go on tangents for all day here. Now,
Come on my
what
show and
are
we'll go down the
yeah,
tangents.
all right. All right. I would love that. I would love that. And I just have to tell some of my patients. I got a long list of patients that need some surgeries, but after we get the surgeries down, sometime in June or July. Anyway, now what are some ways that you found music brought these Jehovah Witnesses together in ways that words cannot do?
So with any religion, usually you walk into the church, they open the doors and they welcome you and they love bomb you, which is part of the manipulation. The first manipulation is like, "Hey,
Right,
welcome, join us."
right, right,
And
right.
this religion does a whole bunch of that on a really deep level, really manipulative, cult like religion. The music was a bond that was much stronger than just, hey, we go to the same church on the weekend, or hey, we read the same magazines and are reading the same propaganda. So these people were like, "Hey, after church, do you want to play some music? Yeah. Oh, you come to I have a studio I built, and oh wow, I have an extra instrument. Oh, bring your bass."
Right.
And then pretty soon there's little groups. So like that was popping up everywhere, and it wasn't just Minneapolis. It was in Chicago. It was in. I'm from northern Wisconsin. It was happening there, and even the leaders in the local congregations also played music. We had a drummer in our congregation. There was like guys playing hair metal, 80s rock. And in the 90s, it was like that was nostalgic music from their teenage years. So they were playing
Right.
and so it was kind of normalized. And even in the movie, there was like an elder who was in they call it a dad rock band, which I thought was really funny, just playing some bass, and it was really innocent and celebrated to play music. And it was this human bond, like, oh,
Hmm.
it's not just church stuff. We also like actually really are into the same thing. We're into the same music. Like,
Hmm.
oh, you can speak the same language of art with me. Oh, let's make a new original song. Oh, you have a bass line for that? Great. This is so we should record it. Right. So this vibrant new thing was happening that was deeper than the religion, where the religion's basically using 1800s scare tactics to manipulate people into
Hmm.
giving up their freedom and their mind and their weekend. Music was this liberation that was like under the surface happening around. And then those bonds with the religion, when someone gets out, they like to put up a wall, like a really, really strong, impenetrable barricade of like silence, like the silent
Hmm.
treatment until death.
Uh,
And they do that. So I'm 15 years without conversations or communication with all of my family, 17 people. So shunning
Wow.
is extreme in this faith.
Wow.
And the
Wow.
music bridged that gap. Like one of the guys, one main character, I guess you could say, there's a couple of main people in the film, five that we follow, but two that we really get to know the story. And the first one that got out of that community wrote a blog, and secretly everyone is reading this blog, which is it's
Uh,
publicly available. But it's like, oh, and I knew some of the people in the second wave because it was a long duration community, and I was pretty fringy. I was reading books from atheists and philosophers
oh,
and physicists and stuff, and like they were asking all the big questions, and I was like, well, I want to know the answer to those questions because religion's not doing it. So we were trading those books, and they're like, hey, have you ever thought about this? And it was like, I didn't
hmm.
know until recently, until I made the movie, that like, oh, is that guy's blog that this friend was secretly reading at that time who was influencing me? And then he's like, you need to understand how um, logical fallacies work. You're doing research with bias. You shouldn't be trying to find the answers that
Ah,
prove what you believe true on the internet, but actually read both sides and try to find like give both sides a chance and try to find which one is more likely real.
right,
And so they were influencing me in these positive, healthy mental health ways and logic ways that ended up helping me get out of this mental trap. And so, like that one guy writing the blog and all those people having a bond with him transcended the barrier that the religion imposed upon them and coerced them to uphold, so they could cross that boundary, even if it was in secret. Um, it worked.
well said. Well said. I followed all of that. Actually, similar question. It goes right into now, connection often equals healing and it can equal trauma. It depends what you're connected to. Connection to Jehovah's Witnesses upset some people greatly, and connection to this music group upset some greatly. I'm sure some people were upset because you always get, some sourpuss somewhere. But how did this collective of musicians help the Jehovah Witnesses who was starting to doubt things and started to leave their religion? Did some of them leave Jehovah's and kind of like seek solace and comfort in this music group?
Interesting. So it's people sort of filtered out a little bit, like not all at the same time. So it's like over the period of like 4 or 5 years, the people in the movie
Hmm.
got out, and there's we kind of only are able to tell half the story because about half of that music community are still in the religion, and
Right.
they're this movie kind of takes place in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. So well, wow, almost 19 years is
Oh,
when the story
goodness.
kind of starts, if you will. And a lot of people are still in, and there's a huge barrier still. Like they won't talk. There's like a really funny but also like intense underground like music battle. They're like, he wrote a song. I know when he was in that one lyric, he was talking about me. And then someone else will write a song like a year later, and it's like, and then they're listening to each other write music on the other side of like on the other side of the war, right? The other side of the
Oh, wow.
enemies, the spiritual warfare, they would call it. I mean, they're just like really great friends who have to separate because of religion getting in the way. But then they write a song and it's like, well, you left our God and you're gonna die. And like, oh my God. And so like their music's like super culty and churchy and cringy. And then this people are out are like, come on, like be real. I don't know. It's
That's
a really
like 50
interesting
Cent.
dynamic.
Like 50 Cent and Tupac. Oh, well, 50 Cent and Puff Daddy right now. Like Puff Daddy's like bad news. And 50 Cent's like, I told you I was truth telling. I was talking about this guy for years. 50 Cent was talking about Puff Daddy for years. And now we have things out. He's out. Or it's kind of like East Coast, West Coast, but Jehovah Witness style, right?
Yeah,
Something like
inside,
that.
outside. Yeah.
Like diss tracks, right? You
Cult
have
member, cult member, ex cult members.
like Remy Martin versus like Lil Kim. They have diss tracks and then they make a diss track. One thing I learned too that is there are approximately 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses worldwide. I'm just wondering, maybe I don't see because I don't spend a lot of time in court. I reckon they must get tired of the courtroom, doing all that witness work. That's why I don't see them. I spend a lot of my time in the garden. I don't see any people. I don't go to court.
You're making a funny pun about the word witness because most people think of it as a courtroom thing, but actually the ironic thing is if you do look them up on the internet, there's a court case where the religion's being sued by someone who's a victim of abuse of some kind basically every week, and they just lost in criminal court in Belgium. So they're like considered a hate group in Belgium, or they were. And
What?
then in Norway, they just lost their status as a religion. So they don't get the standard government religious bonuses. And now there's
Oh
like six
wow.
other European countries that are all investigating the religion right now, and they're
Wow,
guilty
wow.
of crimes. And the real
Ooh,
issue is super nuanced, and it's about human rights. So there, it's like a human rights and the freedom of religion for children to not be abused. I feel if I'm getting that right. Correct us in the comments if I didn't quite get that right. But I've been following the court
no.
trial, and the witnesses lost it. It was like 2 months ago. So
Oh,
there's this huge human rights battle happening across Europe right
right.
now.
I wonder if any of them, because in the documentary, I heard that many people, many witnesses who are gay or think they're gay, they kill themselves, they have a real hard time. So maybe that is one of the factors related to this.
Oh yeah, we don't even touch that. It's mentioned briefly that that's an issue, but yeah, that's a huge issue because they're super homophobic. So if you are closeted or you're still like trying to figure out your own sexuality, and it's basically intimacy is banned in that religion unless you're
Right.
married, and intimacy is banned before marriage too. Like you can't like properly court the person you want to marry to lose your virginity to. Um, they have to have
Hmm.
a chaperone there that reports on you to the leadership the whole time until you're married. But if you're
Hmm.
gay or in anywhere on the LGBT side of the spectrum of sexual identity, there's absolutely no place for you there. They will if you're honest about it with someone in the leadership, they will tell you to try to ignore it and then like
Right.
pray it away and then get
Right.
married to in a heterosexual relationship and hope for the best and like survive until the end of the world and then maybe God will like fix you is their general pitch.
Ooh.
And a lot of people don't make it that far and commit suicide on the inside or die by suicide, or they get out and there's healthy paths. There's a path out, and then
Right.
you can like go have a great life. Please do that.
All
Um,
right.
but people that get out sometimes get out tragically, or they get kicked out, and then everything's pulled up from underneath them, and
Oh,
then suicide's one of those things that happens a lot. And we don't know the numbers because no one's ever really studied this, but it's huge. Like everybody knows a bunch of people that have died that way
die.
in the religion, and some of
Ah.
them are gay. Yeah, like it's a high number.
Ooh. I know one man who seems to be dying while he's alive. I mean, he's just pissing his life away. Maybe he's a little bit traumatized, but this isn't a psychological session. I don't like to talk about my
They're all
clients.
traumatized.
Ooh,
We're all
the
traumatized, include myself in that.
the advice of just ignore it and pray it away. I used to do that for my taxes, and then I heard from the IRS. I said, I guess the ignore and pray it away is not the best, but for some things, it is just best to ignore and pray it away. Like maybe if you're married, you want to stay married. Maybe your wife or husband has a certain smell you don't like. Maybe just try to ignore it, pray it away if you can't fix it. But now we're almost at the end of the interview, and I guess my final question would be there's a lot of things that aren't allowed in this religion. Like there was a story recounted of someone, there was a band playing REM, and someone didn't like the way a dancer was dancing, so they ripped out the cord. They stopped the whole music from playing because they didn't like someone dancing. I mean, oh, they better not see my dancing. So, what are some things you think that are forbidden that are actually good? It's actually good that these things are forbidden. Like maybe other
Oh,
humans who are not Jehovah Witnesses should follow suit and say, you know what, that's a good rule.
oof.
I'm sure I mean, even Hitler had some benefits. I heard he was a great painter. I mean, I'm sure there's something that we could follow.
The first one that came to mind is if you never have sex, you'll never be at risk of getting a sexually transmitted infection or disease.
Right?
But I'm not saying abstinence is a good idea. They are saying that. And so that's a second order effect. That's like, they don't really promote like, oh, this is the only way to avoid diseases. They're just like, no, it's banned. You can't do that ever. And if you do, you're out for it. You'll never talk to your mom again. Um,
Wow.
so I don't think that's a good thing, but it's like an effect. There is something that is kind of a cool aspect. Okay, there's two things that came to mind. One is they're very anti-government. They have their own
Right.
government, and it's super hierarchical and very dangerous. And they basically imagine the Handmaid's Tale scenario is like their dream situation. So if you watch that
Hmm.
series, it's the most like this religion without the clothes, but
Okay.
they have their own clothes regulations. Um, but they're anti-government, and I thought that was kind of when I was like growing up with Rage Against the Machine, and I was like, those guys are my heroes, and they're saying the government's not good, and we should fight against their tyranny. And then this one's saying the government's not okay. Like I think we're aligned. So Zach De La Roca, Jehovah's Witnesses, on the same page. Cool. in a few ways. Um, but I think there's something valuable there in like in being having a resistance mindset to just obedience. However, they're a cult, so
Definitely.
they demand obedience, and a dress code and a bunch of other chaos that the regular society just doesn't do. So like there's a lot more freedom outside, um, underneath just a normal government. There was one more. Mm. Yeah, there's a lot of bad ideas. I could go on all day about that. When you come on my show, we'll talk about all the bad ideas.
Well, maybe Jehovah's Witness can team up with Rage Against the Machine. They could do their own version. No, testify. No, no. Anyway, at the end of the interview, we're overtime a couple of minutes ago. Sorry, Mark Torres is going to kill me. Oh my goodness. Can you tell our listeners where to find you? Amazon.com, Tubi, give all your details.
Yeah, you named them. Amazon and Tubi have it. So if you search there, if you want to know the latest release location, depending on if you're international or they're all on witnessunderground.com. And we also have a new store. So you can get the Blu-ray. The soundtrack is epic and it's 2.5 hours of music on CD or digital version. Blu-ray, DVD, and then other merch is available on the website, but witnessunderground.com for everything.
All right. Well, thank you
Please
so
check it
much,
out.
Scott, for coming on. It was such a pleasure. And I got lost at the time. Oh my goodness. And back to the studio. Bye.